you haven't heard it yet, this is Eddie Hearn this week confirming that Benn versus Eubank Jr. is set to take place this year, and the target date is September.
I mean, it is pretty much agreed, really. I mean, it's not done because we haven't signed contracts, but we're just really, it's more about the location. There's a lot happening behind the scenes. That we want to do this fight in the UK, but we won't know that for a couple of weeks. So it's not going to be a problem making the fight because there's a lot of money in the fight. But it's just a case of where that fight will take place. I mean, again, I'm not involved in the process with the legal team in UKAD. I hope it can take place in the UK. You're looking at September for that fight.
That was Eddie Hearn speaking to IFL TV. Where does it leave the sport boxing? He's talking about moving it to a different place and maybe not being in the UK. Why is he saying it's going to be in a couple of weeks? Are they going to find out something?
I don't know. Listen, and I really can't comment on that if I'm totally honest, because it's been a couple of weeks now. For probably 6 months, we've been hearing that it's going to be a couple of weeks before this situation gets resolved. The one thing I can say, Sam, is that they should not be talking about dates and venues for a fight with him and Chris Eubank Jr. until it's resolved. Or are they trying to force the hand of UKAD and trying to get an answer quicker?
Or maybe, just maybe, he's already actually doing the ban now. He's not boxed for a year. So the Boxing Board of Control may have said, you know what,
to March, John.
But the minimum 2 years, 2 to 4 years is the minimum ban. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the timing.
If he can find some validation in his argument to justify why he can explain some aspects of it, he can reduce it from 4 to 2. So let's assume that somewhere along the line he's going to priced in at 2 as a scenario. He didn't start till March the 15th because he spent 6 months playing hide and seek with himself, sneering and snarling at everybody and trying to find a way around it. And I hope that there's some magic bullet, some panacea solution that gets him out from underneath this, right? But the bottom line is because boxing's so tribalistic, right? I start talking about Frank Warren and I don't slag him off, then I'm a Frank Warren lover and I'm an Eddie Hearn hater, right? But the conversation has to be had about Eddie Hearn in this conversation now because he's the one that's brought it about. You cannot advocate for a prime level promoter that's licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control to be suggesting that he is going to induce a fighter like Chris Eubank Jr., who's a big boy, can make his own decisions, and maybe that's why Chris Eubank Sr.'s got concerns, to fight in a country with a fighter that's got a blemished record that could be banned at the time, loses British Boxing Board of Control licence. Anyone that trains with Conor will have the same situation. Anyone that promotes him should subsequently have the same situation.
Does that happen?
Well, it should happen.
It should happen.
That should happen. That should and this is the old drug issue. I've always said, if you're fighting and you've got a team A, B, C, and D, and they're in your team, and you go before the board and say, "Who's on your team?" He is. Right then, if you fail a drug test and you get a ban, you all get a ban. All of a sudden, less people will be willing to turn a blind eye because it affects their living. And that's what the board should do. And I'm telling you now, it'll cut a lot of that garbage out.
But as a matter of course, if Conor is banned as expected, right, and let's assume that that's going to be the case, or not the case maybe, and then we all got a situation where we go, thank God for that. Yes,
maybe Eddie already knows that he's not going to be banned, which is why they're talking about the possibility of a fight.
He doesn't, right? So he's not. Of course. That's not the case at all. And no one's going to give the UK a hurry up because they don't have that kind of leverage. What he's basically saying is that if I can't make it in the UK, I'm going to make it abroad. Now, anybody that laces a glove, that trains with Conor Benn, that's got a British Boxing Board of Control licence, by the regulations that the British Boxing Board of Control have, will have their licences removed. And we're having this conversation and saying a blue chip promoter is advocating for that. What does it tell you about the sport? They've got it arse about face. They've got no jurisdiction over these people, and there needs to be better controls because this is our best promoter in the world. This is probably the world's best promoter talking about this in a fashion that is beyond the pale. It's not right.
So what does that tell you?
Well, listen, like I'm just echoing what Simon said there, really. I think that if they go ahead with this fight, regardless of the situation of Conor Benn, and he hasn't, served his ban or, it hasn't come out yet from UKAD, and they go September 23rd, they go ahead with a fight, I just think it puts a bad stain on boxing, for your casual fan that watches, they say, it's just sort of like saying, well, it's okay to do whatever you want.
The way to stop this, ultimately, is for Chris Eubank Jr. to come out and say, I don't want this fight.
Do you think people will watch it?
Listen, this is one of those old occasions where you've got two fights that people watch regardless if it's for a belt or not. You're going to want to watch this fight. But the problem is that it's the aftermath, how it affects our game, how it affects people's appetite for our game. Because it means, you know what, I'll take whatever I want. You can't do anything about it because you now set precedent. And therefore, everything will crumble. Now you've set precedent. This can be done.
Surely that-
and that's why the board have got to do everything possible to make sure, as far as we're concerned, anybody involved, you're blocked, you're banned.
So is Eddie Hearn not worried about the consequences of what happens in the aftermath?
No. Are you under the impression that he is?
No, I'm asking why.
If you
he's
look
not,
at someone,
what
with
you
all
just
due
said
respect to him, he's a brilliant promoter, and his team are brilliant at what they do. But you've also got they're bait and switch merchants. You ask them a question, you put them on the spot, and they move the conversation on. They start confusing you with a completely different subject that you didn't start on in the first place. And you've got to keep your focus on what you're actually saying.
true.
I know
it's
what that
very
feels
true.
like.
So here we are, and they've got to be made accountable for their behaviour. And they've got. I mean, like we sat in the studio. And everybody in the world that's got a brain that's ever done a commercial deal in their lives knows that Eddie Hearn could have released Conor Benn from his contract and said, you can't fight. I can drop this fight because you've failed a drug test. He sat here barefaced, looking across the table at me saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And people buy into that crap. And that's the reality of the boxing world. The British Boxing Board of Control have got to get some teeth. And I think Robert's got the appetite to do it right now because I think they've poked him, metaphorically speaking. I think they've poked the stick at him and keep on telling him that he
Robert
is,
Smith, the chairman
and I
of the
think they've
British
got the
Board of
appetite
Control.
for it.
I think the alarming thing about this whole situation is that it went quiet for a while. Now it's resurfaced, and they're talking about it like it's never happened, and nothing's been resolved, and that is concerning, and that's alarming, and it's not good for the
So
sport
at the
of boxing.
moment, it's talk. It's talk until something's signed, sealed, and ready to be delivered. It's talk because a few weeks ago, Eddie put something in regards to Chris and Conor fighting each other, but it's just a suggestion. Because when I talked to Ben said, no, the fight's still on. As far as I'm not concerned, I don't care what Eddie says.
But the danger of talk is, right, we had Kalle Sauerland, who I quite like as a bloke, right, sat on air on the day that Conor was announced as failing his drugs test, telling us openly that he'd got doctors to give his fighter advice that this particular drug that Conor was being accused of taking was okay for his fighter to fight with.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what Kalle said loud. I'm not making it up, misrepresent. That's what Kalle said. I
Yeah.
said, are you sure about that? Yeah, I am, yeah. This is the world. We're through the looking glass here, fellas. You know, what's up is down.
Well, we might talk about that a little bit further in the hour because there's a talk about the IOC and the end of boxing taking part in the Olympics, and maybe that's one of the reasons why. Josh Taylor's been calling and trading barbs with Conor Benn. Why is he getting involved in it?
You know what? Like it or not, Conor Benn is a great target. And the thing is, I know one time they were talking about Conor Benn and Kell Brook, and I thought, you know what, that's a bit of theatre there. Because any fighter that's fighting Conor Benn for real or wants to fight Conor Benn for real, you're going to throw the failed drug test in his face. Kell didn't do that. You know, I thought that's a bit of theatre we're seeing there. This is just talk to try and negotiate something because these two guys actually sort of get on with each other. Josh Taylor now is in the mix. Josh Taylor's the kind of guy that he'll say whatever is in his heart and on his sleeve. So if that fight is all of a sudden makeable, he's got to get through his ban first. And these are great fights for him. Put your hands up, fall on your sword, bite the bullet, do your ban, and then get on with it. Because there's still so many lucrative fights out there for him. But you've got to swallow your pride, mate.
I think, you know, from the Josh Taylor point of view, he's come out now saying that he wants to fight Conor Benn. Like, he knows that there's big money out in the Middle East for Conor Benn to box out there. There's a lot of interest there. Eddie Hearn's sort of said that, and they'll be looking for an opponent. Josh Taylor's coming off that defeat against Teofimo
So maybe
Lopez.
that's the cash out.
And he's
Maybe that's the
thinking,
cash out.
It's called prize fighting. He's thinking, listen, you know, this stage of my career, there's money, and that's what the fighters are ultimately thinking.
Okay, we'll be talking to a new Hall of Famer in the next few moments.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.